Hey guys, and welcome back to the Just As I Am podcast. It's your bestie, Nicole, and today things are going to get a little toasty because we are talking about the notorious three amigos of the Bible. We are going to talk about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, so stay tuned. So this week has absolutely felt like one of the longest weeks ever. It was the last full week of school, and I have definitely been feeling the energy and the craziness of the last full week of school. And I won't say it almost didn't happen. Let's just say there was a chance that I wasn't going to be on time again. But you know what? I pulled through and I did it for you. So we're here today to talk about the three guys, the three besties, the three brothers, whatever you want to call them. We're going to talk about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And this is this definitely is a Bible story that I'm sure you have heard many times at least two or three. Let's be honest. So, especially in our childhood, right? It's one of the Bible stories that we definitely learned in Sunday school. And you can find this story in Daniel around chapter 3, verse 30, but we are going to start in Daniel 3:1 and go from there. I mean, we always need all the information, right? We don't need just a little tidbit because we love knowledge. Knowledge is power, right? So this takes place after Daniel, who the book is named after. Daniel, good old Daniel. Daniel has been taken from his home. He's been thrown in the lion's den. And he has explained the king's dream. Okay? Sound familiar? That part sounds a little bit like Joseph, right? So, if you go reading, you will find that the king's name was Nebuchadnezzar. And I tried to dig in with this information because I feel like Nebuchadnezzar, all the kings were named Nebuchadnezzar. It could just be me, but I feel like a lot of kings had the name Nebuchadnezzar. But with this information, I actually found that there was only 2 kings that were named Nebuchadnezzar. And this happens to be the second Nebuchadnezzar, or Nebuchadnezzar the second. Is that the first name? Is that the last name? So anyways, this is the second Nebuchadnezzar. And chapter 2 concludes with Nebuchadnezzar being so thankful for Daniel. Because, Daniel translated his dream. He explained what the happenings were, right? So it concludes with Nebuchadnezzar being so thankful, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which are friends of Daniel, get appointed to manage the province of Babylon. Okay, so that's where we're at. Chapter 3 starts off strong. It starts off telling us about how the king has built this statue. Okay, this statue is very extravagant. Okay, it is large and in charge. I mean, it's basically a physical representation of how Nebuchadnezzar kind of sees himself, right? Okay, this thing is gold. And I don't mean gold as in like it's good. I mean gold as in it's literally gold. And it is huge. Okay, this thing is 90 feet tall and 90 feet wide. Gigantic. Okay. So, you know what? Let's do the math real quick. If it's 90 feet high and 90 feet wide, It is 30 yards on the football field. So from end zone to the 30-yard line, that's how big this thing is, okay? Just for all of you football maniacs out there. But it's placed on a plain of Dura, okay? And, it's there for everybody to see. Like, it's placed on a smooth plain in the middle of everything, as you would want some kind of idol to be, right? Especially because, now listen to this. This province is in this province. Wait a minute. This place is in the province of, think about it, make your guess, Babylon. Woohoo! Made it. Okay. So anyways, it is in Babylon. Well, when you have a big head, you tend to do crazy things, right? Well, like I said, Nebuchadnezzar was full of himself, essentially. So, with his craziness from the size of his head, he made some pretty strict strategic rules here, okay? With this new statue came many rules and instructions to go. You got the statue, but he made all of these rules and instructions to go with it. It wasn't just for decor, okay? When kicking off the party, Nebi got everybody together. The whole town, city, province, everything. He got everybody, your mom and them together, okay? He got the magistrates, the judges, the governors, the advisors, everybody for the dedication of this thing. Once everybody surrounded the statue, a herald came out and he says, okay, listen to this. He says, if you hear the sound of some kind of music, you better fall face down and worship this thing. No exceptions. If you hear a lyre, a harp, a horn, if you hear anything like that, you better stop what you're doing, get on your hands and knees, fall face down, and start worshiping this thing. Now, we are people of free will, right? We tend to, there are rules, but sometimes, we just don't feel like we should follow them. They don't apply to us, right? So here's the thing for the people who decided, I don't think that's for me. You would get thrown in the furnace, okay? I don't know, and this isn't a furnace like in today's world, okay? It's not something, small enough it's not your little space heater, okay? This thing is huge. We have in West Tennessee here, we have a place called Discovery Park. And there's this one room kind of that I like going in occasionally. And it's like the torture room. Now bear with me. It's the torture room, okay? Well, when I kind of think of this furnace, I think of two things. This is the first thing. In that room, they have, all kinds of stuff. They have their version of the electric chair. They have like the big stretchy thingy. They have this, that, these, and those. But they have this big iron bowl type thing, okay? And it's hollow, right? And people were put in that, and then that thing was placed like over a fire. So they would basically be baked alive. That's the first thing that I think of when I think of the furnace. The second thing I think of is if you go to like an Italian restaurant or just like some pizza restaurants, because not all of them have it, but some of them do. They have the big pizza ovens, right? The big fiery things that they stick the pizza. Yeah, that's the second thing that comes to my mind when I hear this. So it doesn't matter who you are or where you're from, you better obey. This is what's going down. This is what's happening. And so everybody, scared for their lives, followed these rules. Okay? For now. Well, now this is where we start to climax. Okay? We're going uphill. And just like you've probably encountered one before, well, we got some tattletales involved, okay? As someone who works in a school, especially in the elementary part of the school, I encounter tattletales on the daily. So are we shocked? Absolutely not. But we had some tattletales involved, okay? Now this is a side story. I was watching this video on how people trying to pronounce Shakota and they kept saying Chakota. So I don't know if Chaldeans or Chaldeans is what this is called, but you get my point. So anyways, these guys come along and they start telling Nebi, okay, they tell him that those guys that are in charge of Babylon are not obeying the whole worshiping thing, okay? So naturally, Nebi gets furious. We're just hot-headed naturally. It's just his biggest characteristic, his biggest personality trait, okay? So he gets furious, and he calls in Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? So he calls them in, and he starts questioning them. He's like, is it true? Is what I've heard true? Are you not falling down on your hands and knees and worshiping the statue when, you hear the sound of the instruments, the horns, whatever? And he tells them, he's like, hey, look, guys, let's just talk about it real quick, okay? I am willing to forgive and forget if next time the instruments and the horns and all that stuff, next time that sounds, you just do what you're told and you fall down and you worship the statue. Okay? I mean, forgive and forget. We won't, even come back to this. We'll just continue on like nothing happened, right? But if you don't, I'm fixing to toss you in the furnace. I mean, point blank. That's what's going to happen. And so he tells them, he's like, okay, he starts questioning them again, right? Let me double check, okay? Are you going to, listen? Are you going to do what you're told? Are you going to worship? He said, I mean, come on. Who is this God that can rescue you from my power? Okay, so I don't know who Nebi is thinking he is, if he thinks he's the Hulk, if he thinks he's Tony Stark. I don't know. He's really thinking that I've got the power. That's what he's thinking, okay? Well, they replied. Listen to this. And I mean, verbatim from my Bible, okay? CSB version, look it up. They replied with, we don't need to give you an answer to this question. The sass, the power, the strength, the audacity. I literally laughed really hard when I read that because it was just the snap, 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 okay? So anyways, they tell him, if our God exists, he can rescue us from the fire and your power. No big deal, okay? But even if our God does not exist and he does not save us, we're still not worshiping your God. I mean, that's just BT dubs, so it soothed my soul, but King Nebi, it did not soothe his soul, okay? This did not soothe Neb at all, and he got even more angry and commanded that they crank the heat up 7 times hotter, okay? So this thing is already an incinerator. Think of a crematorium, okay? This thing is already smoking incredibly hot. And he says, you know what? Crank it up 7 times because I ain't putting up with this. So after they cranked it up 7 times, he then commanded the soldiers to tie them up and toss them in. So let's say they wasted absolutely no time tying them up. And what I mean by this is they still had their whole garb on, okay? They had all of their clothing on. They still had on their trousers, their head coverings, all the things, okay? Their robes, everything. Well, the men that took them on, so the men who tied them up and were going to actually throw them in the furnace, it says that the furnace was so hot that these men who were just carrying them, they weren't even in trouble. They were just following directions. The men who were carrying them to throw them in the furnace died because it was so hot. Well, from here, because the men just died carrying them, they just, I guess, when they dropped down, they just automatically dropped Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the furnace. So the boys are now hanging out in the furnace. Well, at some point, the king spied with his little eye, and he asked the people that he was sitting with, he said, wait a minute. He said, hey, didn't we only throw 3 people into the furnace, right? Only 3? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There wasn't a 4th one, right? Well, they replied yes. But the king stood up and he was like, well, look. I mean, use your eyes and look, because he saw 4, F-O-U-R, 4 untied at that. Remember, they got tied up. So 4 untied men in the furnace. And they were unharmed. The fire was not, it was surrounding them, but it was not burning them up. It was not harming them in any way. And the king was like, he was so confused, but he told him also, he was like, that looks like the Son of God, the 4th person that was in the fire. So the furnace is still blazing, mind you, still 7 times hotter. But while it's still blazing, the king goes up and he calls them out. He calls Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to come out of the furnace, out of the fire. And once they came out, everyone gathered around. All of the people, I'm sure, the magistrates, the judge, everybody who he gathered around for his statue, let's just think of it that way. Everybody gathered around him, right? Not a single hair or even a thread of their clothing was harmed. We didn't have any fried split ends. We didn't have any ashes on our clothes. They didn't even smell like they were anywhere near the fire, okay? Coming to his senses, finally, because we all do. Sometimes it takes some of us longer than others, but finally, the king, King Nebuchadnezzar, comes to his senses. And he said, praises to the God of these men. He sent his angel and rescued these servants who trusted him. They broke the rules to worship their own God. So he's had this epiphany. Okay, let's think of it that way. He had this epiphany. We've talked about it before. Okay, sometimes some of us, we can't just believe and have faith. We have to see things with our eyes in order for it to click. Okay, and this was that instance for Nebuchadnezzar. His praises be to God of these men. He sent his angel and rescued these servants who trusted him. They broke the rules to worship their own God. After this, Nebuchadnezzar issued a decree. Now, this is a little extreme. It goes from about G to PG. I don't know. Are we already PG? It goes PG, PG-13, whatever. Anyone who says anything offensive about their God, about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, about your God and my God, look, if anybody says anything offensive about God, their God, they will be torn limb from limb, and their house will be turned into a garbage dump. There is no God like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's God. Point blank, period. Okay? Says it how it is. So Shad, Mesh, and Abedi got rewarded by the king, okay? Since he came to his senses, he was so thankful for these three, okay? He rewarded them once again in their province of Babylon. So that essentially ends chapter 3. And if you want to figure out more about the proclamation or the decree that King Nebuchadnezzar made at the end there that I was just talking about, the first couple of verses of chapter 4 kind of go over that again. And then it talks about another dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. Apparently he sleeps a lot, but that was rude. I sleep a lot too. But anyways, he has lots of dreams that need explanations. I do too. So, I feel him. But anyways, so the first few verses of chapter 4 kind of revamp the decree if you want to look into it. And that essentially wraps up our story for today. I know I was a little bit all over the place and I repeated myself. My brain has been fried or like jello, as I said earlier, for the past week or two. But I hope that you were able to keep up and follow along and you got something out of this story. But one of the things that I wanted to mention kind of about this story is this story makes me think of how, even with Daniel got thrown in the lion's den for not, praying to the king. And so Daniel got thrown in the lion's den for not following directions because he was doing what was right. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were doing the same exact thing. They were following God's rules not to worship any other idols. And they got thrown in the fiery furnace. But God was faithful and kept them safe and protected them because they stayed faithful and true to God. And in my mind, I take that as, sometimes you just got to listen to your conscience. People are going to tell you to do things in this world that are not right. And when you stay true and you follow God's rules and you obey Him, that He will help you be victorious in the end. He'll protect you from all harm in a sense. So anyways, that is the ending for this episode. Next episode, I'm so excited because Chloe will be back. We are going out to visit my Colorado cousins next week, and it's going to be another very special episode. And I hope you listen, and I hope you learn, and I hope you love it. So stay tuned, and we will be back next week with more. So thank you so much for listening, as always. See you later.